Thank you very much for reassembling for this session on conflict, art and social healing, to be chaired by Professor Satish Kumar Jha. I'll quickly begin with the introduction because I think we are running short on time. So without further ado, a quick introduction. Professor Satish Kumar Jha is a professor of political science at Aryabhatta College, Delhi University. He completed his Masters and MPhil from Delhi University and earned his Ph.D. from Center for Political Studies at JNU. His research, training and publications focus on various aspects of Indian politics, modern Indian intellectual traditions and comparative political theory. The speakers for this session include Dr. Rina Kashyap, who is an associate professor at Department of Political Science at Lady Shri Ram College, University of Delhi. She chaired the Department of Journalism there from 1995 to 2005. She was also a Fulbright Scholar at the Center for Justice and Peace Building, Eastern Mennonite University, and a visiting fellow at Columbia University's Center for International Conflict and Resolution. She will be speaking on the topic of art and conflict resolution. The next speaker we have is Shri Amit Kalla ji, a distinguished poet and painter. His art merges spiritual depth and abstraction. Kalla has published 4 poetry collections, including award-winning Hone Na Hone Se Pare, and received accolades like the Mark Rothko Residency Award in 2002. He will be speaking on the topic Ramta Trig Collective Movement, My Experiences with Community Empowerment Through Creativity. Finally, we have a joint presentation by Rakesh Ranjan Das and Varsha Rani on spirituality, consciousness and social healing in Baul Philosophy. Rakesh and Varsha are Ph.D. research scholars at the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you, and we will begin with the session. Now I hand over it to the chair.
Thank you, Sanjana. Good afternoon. Welcome to this 2 days conference, which is being organized by Rays of Wisdom Society and this Foundation for Creative Social Research. In fact, the theme for this conference is quite interesting because there are different ways in which conflict is approached today. But the way this entire thing has been conceptualized, that how the resources from art, theatre, music, dance, and many other spheres of our life can be tapped to deal with the issue of conflict in society is itself, something very interesting. Because one thing is very clear, because as a political science student, I know that power and conflict are always there, have been there. And that will remain with us. And there are attempts from different directions, particularly social science as a whole has been dealing with this issue. But the way this entire conference has looked at this issue tells us that how we can move away from the standard notion of conflict and its resolution. So therefore, I think that some of the papers which will be presented here in next 2 days, and in the first session in the morning and then the remaining sessions, will throw new ideas, new light on this entire issue. So without standing between the speakers and you, I will invite Dr. Rina Kashyap, who will be speaking on art and conflict resolution. But before that, just one caution, because we have run our time by half an hour. So we'll have to, manage it as per the instruction of the organizers. So what I suggest that 15 minutes each to the 3 presenters, and then the remaining time we can devote on the discussion. So Dr. Rina.
Thank you so much. My congratulations to Rila Hota and Maninder Thakur and the team for bringing together an array of ideas and their interlocutors. And I'm glad I came early and was, and could hear the discussions that were taking place. And congratulations, it's going very well. So, okay. So what I would be, before we get into art and conflict resolution, the relationship, if any, I just thought we'd unpack the terms, and I believe that most of you are political science students like me. So I don't have to spend much time, but I just thought it's important to recall that what exactly is conflict. So when we think about conflict, it's a clash of ideas, interests, identities, on these, the array of issues, and it could take place in the domains of politics, society, economy, and which itself is so layered. There are so many levels of society, economy, and politics, and it could also be at either at individual levels of the micro, meso, or macro, or simultaneously at all these levels. And also how the micro will change in the context of what is the macro for you. So the national could be the micro here if you're looking at the meso in terms of the regional organization, and the macro as the international. But when you're looking at the institution of the family, your own family in particular, then we get into the family becoming the micro, and the national becoming your macro. So political science, social science, sociology, all these disciplines have looked at the issue of conflict, and one of the important points that emerges out of this is that, conflict is endemic. It is natural. It's the most natural thing to happen in society. It's part of the very human condition. And the problem, of course, with conflict is when it gets violent. Otherwise, right from Hegel to Marx and even liberals will talk about conflict as being the motor of change. The whole concept of politics is about how do you really resolve these conflicts. Liberal politics would be about resolving the conflicts. And it is again not surprising that post-Second World War, we see conflict resolution emerge as a discipline. And here the emergence of a discipline also then problematized the terminologies related to conflict resolution. And there was this particular understanding by the time we come to the end of the 20th century that perhaps conflict resolution is not necessarily the best way to look at the issues of conflict. It's a whole spectrum. So understanding conflict itself as a spectrum. So conflict prevention, as you can see, would be about as the term suggests, that you're preventing a conflict. Before it has taken place, it's something that the diplomats and the United Nations claim to undertake, where you're seeking to suppress a conflict, either through brute force or through artifice. And an interesting example out here is one of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's court. It is said that whenever he had foreigners visiting his court, he made sure, and what historians identify as female Amazon warriors of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's court, he would have the courtesans dress as male warriors and perform this very robust, aggressive, almost aggressive dance. And the whole purpose of this was to actually communicate the martial and the strength of the local population. So it's there to intimidate the foreigners. So you could kind of say that, maybe it was about you're preempting a conflict from happening, that this is what we are, even our women, the second sex, the weaker sex within quotes, if this is what they can do, you can imagine what our men do. So pardon me for the politically incorrect analogy out here, but so then we have conflict management. So this was another term which got added to this discipline, conflict management, and of course it comes from this whole, another discipline, which is public administration. You're talking about managing a conflict. And this particular management of conflict was all about that you're preventing a particular conflict from spiraling and becoming violent. and it is associated with basically maintenance of law and order. And as you can see, both conflict prevention and conflict management are status quoist. And because the whole point was that, there is conflict in society, how do we now manage it? And as political science students, we do know that the liberal view about politics is always about politics as conciliation, that it's about a circulation of elites, as the elite theorists would also tell us. So basically, it's very status quoist when you're trying to prevent, when you talk about conflict prevention and conflict management. Conflict prevention, of course, can be radical, but not the way we are looking at in terms of from the UN's perspective or the diplomat's perspective. It is more about suppressing the conflict. So conflict resolution, as a term, seems to be attractive because you're seeking the resolution of a conflict. You're assuming that now the conflict is going to be resolved, it's going to end something undesirable. But this particular conflict, this particular term was then replaced consciously by some grassroots peace builders, and this came from the Quakers, and the Mennonites in the US. The entire discipline, of course, is coming from the US. So they replaced it with this conflict. The term that they used was conflict transformation, because what they felt is that conflict resolution was, in some senses, seeking to deny that there is a real conflict. In the sense, the understanding now that these peace builders had was that the conflict does not necessarily end. Because it doesn't come to an end with the signing of a peace agreement. It does not come to an end with simply the let's say, the guns go silent and you've signed a peace agreement. Well, it doesn't necessarily come to an end. There's a lot of work which has to be done post the signing of the peace agreements. And this is where the whole notion of conflict transformation came to be. So just to quickly again tell you what is the distinction between the two. So conflict resolution would be about ending something undesirable, that's the focus. But conflict transformation, on the other hand, would focus on not just ending a destructive context, but also building something new. The focus is on building. It's more relationship-centric. It's looking at the immediate, plus it is looking at the long term. And conflict resolution's horizon is short term. It's about giving immediate relief to pain, anxiety, difficulties. Conflict transformation tries to be not crisis-driven, but of course crisis-responsive. And conflict resolution does not escalate a conflict. They seek to de-escalate a conflict. But conflict transformation, on the other hand, sees conflict as an ecology that is relationally dynamic with ebb and flow. So in a sense that they are not simply going to be looking at de-escalation. They look at de-escalation when it comes to violence. But as far as other issues of conflict are concerned, which they feel must be brought out into the open, they probably will be escalated. So it is both ebb and flow of a conflict. And because they see conflict as an opportunity, as a gift, as the native Americans would say, that it is a context now for us to examine our structures, our social structures, economic structures, political structures, and be honest and alive and dynamic. So therefore seeing conflict as an opportunity. So that these structures are now, when you say that they are honest, what we are saying is that we are examining them and we are hoping now they'll be more responsive to human needs, aspirations, and growth. And John Paul Lederach, who's one of the key Mennonite peace builders, he uses the metaphor of the head, heart, hand, legs, and feet to describe what exactly is conflict transformation. He said the head that we have is, we need the head. As a peace builder, you need all this. You need the head because your head is going to be giving you a conceptual understanding of the conflict. That is important. You do need an understanding which you require your head, a conceptual view of the conflict, the heart, but not, again, this is this modernity separation of the head, heart, and the hand, and he's talking about putting it all together. So heart, he says, is where you have your center of emotions, intuitions, and spiritual life, something that was being discussed in the earlier session. That's where you go for in the heart, and you need that to, this is where you go for sustenance and direction. This is where you go for guidance. And hands, of course, the metaphor being that, well, you have to construct peace. It's going to be laborious. It's going to be a laborious task. And the metaphor of feet and legs, that it's a long journey, that peace will not happen overnight, not just with the signing of the peace agreement. Now, keep with this in mind. Now let's look at what could be the relationship between conflict resolution and art. And my submission is that we can't really talk about, let's, have a play, let's have a song, and then, the conflict gets resolved. The issue of art, I think, is better understood when we look at conflict transformation. That would be the lens through which we could approach this. So there is, of course, the relationship. So what is art? The art that you would have seen yesterday with Rila's performance, this is the art. There is one notion of art which mesmerizes. It is beautiful. It seduces. It gives you hope. It gives you optimism, and it spellbounds you, so much so that there is this anecdote about Karl Marx being in England, and he's angry with the British, and he says, and for somebody who's talked not just about religion but also as nationalism as an opiate, he is forced into evoking the German musical heritage, his German musical heritage, which he says is very exclusive. And look what we have produced. And he talks about Gluck's Armide, the opera Armide, and says, my God, it is so spellbounding. So somebody like Marx, again, is forced to, just see what music is doing is making him forget that these are national boundaries which he's asking the workers actually not to think about. So that is not the art, so that's one dimension of art, but the aesthetics of art also also take us to another dimension which problematizes the very notion of conflict resolution, and therefore we go to conflict transformation. And this is where we say that the context of production of art itself is conflict. That there is one particular art which does emerge, the very production of art itself is conflict. That's the context. And think about Van Gogh's Potato Eaters. Hands of Soil. He's telling us about the social conflict. There is a social conflict. So here what we're looking at is we broaden the notion of conflict not simply as an armed conflict, but also as a social conflict. And art, therefore, as related to this, art as social criticism, that is where you are critiquing your social relationships. You're critiquing your institutions, your contemporary institutions, and this is what Bob Dylan's "The Answer, My Friend, Is Blowing in the Wind," John Lennon's "Imagine," the rock bands, jazz as an expression of black resistance, and home. Back home out here, Sahir Ludhianvi's "Jinhe Naz Hai, Hind Pe Wo Kahan Hai." All these are the progressive poets whose songs are now basically critiquing. They're using the art, beautiful poetry, but it is telling you about the ugliness in society, something that has to change. Songs as resistance, protest songs. And since most of you are from GNU, you would know the significance of protest songs. So then it takes us to what does this art really do? Art as reflection at the level of the individual. What is art really seeking to do is to, taken from the point of view of the individual, it is a context of reflection. It's documentation, it's catharsis. That's what happens to the individual audience member in the Greek, watching the Greek plays, the significance of catharsis. And our art, therefore, is able to counter alienation. It helps you find the whole. This is because if you reflect on art, it's even the simplest of art. You will never find simplicity in good art. What appears to you as simple is actually the simplicity which lies on the other side of complexity. So this is simplicity, but you wouldn't give a fig for this simplicity. But this simplicity, which lies on the other side of complexity, is what art forces you to do. That is the simplicity you arrive at while wading through complexity, and this is what art therefore does. It's ending your alienation and helping you find the whole. So the artist, so it's there both for the artist and the viewer as an observer, and it is in some senses also art is inducting the individual into history, which takes us then to the next point about art as reflection at the level of society. We could say it's about, I'll just pick up just one aspect, which is memorialization. And there are several contexts, several sites of memorialization. We could look at museums in this particular context. And so art, when we say that memorialization, we do know that what is it that you choose to memorialize? What is it that you choose to remember? How is it that you choose to remember also becomes significant. And this, of course, would be that there is society which is deciding, or is it the state which is deciding? And both in the context of state and society, we do know as students of politics that it is power which is deciding what is it that we choose to remember, what is it that we are memorializing, and what will the purpose of that memorialization be. So here, since I'm short of time, I'll just quickly go through the slides. Now this is from the Holocaust Museum. So there is one way in which the Jews are remembering. So this is the tattoos which they got as at Auschwitz. So these, you're remembering the horrors, and you're also now, but remembering the horrors and talking about never again. But the way, and this is in Jerusalem, the way you are remembering, the way you're memorializing, in some senses, the Jewish state has come to, or Israel has come to justify a siege mentality. Its citizens and itself is besieged by, it's that siege mentality. So here, memorialization to constantly remember what happened at Auschwitz, how you're thinking to remember is also significant. This is the Partition Museum. I think I'll just, in the context of India, I'll just skip this part. I'll come to the Japanese context, that is the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. Now what is interesting about this is it has two wings, East Wing and the West Wing. And the West Wing was built first. This is what it was at which was basically listing and showcasing the horrors of what happened with the bombing, and of course that this should not have happened. Japan as a victim. Then the East Wing was built. The East Wing is interesting, and this is what Cynthia Enloe says, that when she wanted to visit this Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, she said, my Japanese feminist friends underlined, forced me, they said, you must visit the East Wing. Because what is the East Wing doing? East Wing is has pictures about what was Hiroshima before the bombing and what is Hiroshima after the bombing, and what is significant about what was it before. She said, my Japanese friends wanted me to note that this is a city which was militarized. They did not want to think about themselves only, they wanted to not think about themselves only as victims, they also wanted to acknowledge that there is this whole spectrum of violence. This is militarization, and we do know about the excesses of the Japanese military during the Second World War. So the pictures then tell us that, okay, here is, we were militarized, Hiroshima was important in that context, and it's not a justification of the atomic bombing, but it is how they are choosing to remember. They're choosing to remember. So we are not abdicating responsibility, you're talking about the horrors which should not be repeated. At the same time, you're also not saying that you are victims only. And so these are just the pictures. I'll end here, I'm now short of time. So this is the East Wing, and of course the West Wing, which talks about, so if we were to only look at this West Wing, what you'll walk away with is how, here was Japan, which was a victim. And here are these honest Japanese feminists and activists who made sure that they remember the culpability of militarized states in reaching where we are. So I'll just stop here.
A very interesting paper, particularly the last two aspects which you try to deal with, the resolution and transformation. That perhaps should make this intervention from the art more meaningful. But what you pointed out, particularly this remembrance, the memory, we have to be slightly careful in dealing with this issue where it cuts both ways. Because particularly the way the politics is being played over the issue of memory. So dealing with the conflict through this memory or archival value of the art in today's context has a very mixed meaning. So, but thank you, very interesting paper. So with this we move to our second presentation. We have Amit Kalla. Please go ahead. 15 minutes.
Welcome.
Mic.
So I'm Amit Kalla. I'm a visual artist. Basically, I'm a painter, and unfortunately, I'm a poet also. क्योंकि आज तो poetry का दिन है. And this is the only. So Ramta Drig. So today my topic is, I'm not a scholar. I'm not some a heavy scholar professor. I'm an artist. तो artist के जैसा perceive करना है मुझको. Perception artist वाला होना चाहिए, तो थोड़ा सा soft tone रहे अपना. Conflicts की बात है, but soft. So Ramta Drig. So Ramta Drig is our. It's not a organization. It's not a NGO. It's not a it's a group of people which lives in the western part of the Rajasthan. I'm from my village is Ludurwa. It's 22 kilometers from Jaisalmer. And originally I'm Kashmiri. Anandvardhan और बिल्कुल पीछे बट लोलट बट नायक श्री शंकुक वो परंपरा. सो कश्मीर से भगे अफगानिस्तान की तरफ टुवर्ड्स द हिंदू कुश और कुछ लेके गए साथ में, फिर वहां से फिर भागे तो ये सिल्क रूट से होते हुए लुधुरवा में आके थोड़ा सा रुके. आज का कहानी नहीं है, 500 years 600 years बैक का दिस इज द स्टोरी. सो आई एम द मोस्ट शॉर्टेस्ट, most thin, otherwise all broad shoulder, big heroic. So some holds the shastra and some holds the shastras. दोनों हैं. Our Devi, Kul Devi, Ushtavahini, she sits on the camel, and holds both the things, शास्त्र and शस्त्र. तो इन दोनों परंपरा का एक व्यक्ति आपके सामने आया है, लेकिन वो दोनों ही नहीं पकड़ता जी. उसके हाथ में तो ब्रश है, उसके हाथ में तो कलम है. और एक और अनफॉर्चुनेट थिंग है that I am also a part of one of you. I did my masters from art and school, art and aesthetics department from JAU. So first batch का I am a student. बड़ा अच्छा लग रहा है कि अपनों के बीच में बैठ के बात कर रहे हैं. वो सद्दाम कहाँ गया? देखो सद्दाम चला गया. मुझे कहता है कि वो मुस्लिम वहाँ से आए कि नहीं. अरे मैंने कहा भाई शांति. So I am very much एक डरावा फ्रॉम ऑन्टोलॉजी, एंक्सियोलॉजी, एपिस्टेमोलॉजी. सर को कहा कि ये जो कौन सा क्वांटम फिजिक्स 10 बार जन्म लूंगा ना फिर भी नहीं समझ में कुछ नहीं आया. उनका ये है क्या सर क्वांटम फिजिक्स? यू नो सुनो लिसन. ए वैभव एक मिनट
सर, हम इसको सीखें तो फिर जन्म लेने की जरूरत नहीं.
ये तो हुआ है ना, वो बहुत ट्रांस माइग्रेशन ऑफ द सोल की बात है. तो वही तो सीखने के लिए हम सब बैठे हैं. सो अल्टीमेटली द पर्पस ऑफ आर्ट it's very much close to spirituality, and spirituality is a different kind of entity. कोई जर्मन होगा उसमें भी वो spirituality होगी. एक ट्री में spirituality होती है, एक स्पेस में एक spirituality होती है, आपकी मुस्कानों में वो spirituality होती है. वो धर्म से जाति से नहीं आता सब. ये एक ऐसा तत्व है, it's such a element which you नैसर्गिक नेचुरल है. आपका नेचर है स्पिरिचुअल, आपके भीतर है. वो किसी ने दिया नहीं है. दिया तो नाम है जी, अमित नाम दे दिया. त्वम किम असि, बोलते हैं तुम कौन हो? अहम ब्रह्मास्मि. अब आप प्रूव करो जी मैं ब्रह्म नहीं हूं. तो अभी खाना खाते खाते वी हैड अ टॉक. सोच रहा था कि एक शिव सूत्र का एक सूत्र याद आया. शिव सूत्र, शिव ने शिव सूत्र दिए पार्वती को. ऐसा बताते हैं कि बहुत सारे सूत्र दिए. तो शिव सूत्रा में देयर इज 2 सूत्र, 2-3 के बाद में एक आता है, दोनों लेकिन मैं साथ में लेता हूँ. ज्ञानम बंधन एंड ज्ञानम मुक्ति. ज्ञानम बंधन एंड ज्ञानम मुक्ति. अब ये सारा डिस्कोर्स इन दोनों के बीच का है. एक शटल है जो कभी इधर जाती है, मेट्रो ट्रेन कभी मुक्ति में होती है, कभी बंधन में होती है. And it all depends on our own processor, how we contemplate. So next slide, sir. This is Ramta Drig. What is Drig? Do you know? Anybody knows Drig का मतलब बताएगा कोई? Drig means the eye. Eye. ये Drig हैं, हम सब Drig हैं. We all are Drig. And Ramta means wanderer. Ramta जोगी. रमता means in our Rajasthani we said मैं तो घूमर रमवा जावा जी. घूमर रमवा मैं जाना. रमना means to play. रमना means for an artist रंग का रम जाना. हरियाणा में के रमे है तू, खेलना. रमने के कई अर्थ हैं. एंड रमना इज फ्रॉम रम धातु जिसके connotations, metaphors बिल्कुल डिफरेंट. नेक्स्ट. सो दृग रमता है, रमता ही जाता है. पाता पर्वत, पानी पाताल का चखता. दृग रंग पकड़ता है, रेखाओं की संगत करता. दृग कबीर वन अंतरिक्ष के दिगांत विस्तार को ताने बाने में बुनता है. दृग नानक सा फिरता है, वंडरर, वंडरिंग सीयर. नानक से कितना वंडरिंग किया नानक ने, ट्रेवलर. तो ये यात्राएं हैं, ये हमको आध्यात्मिक चेतना की तरफ बढ़ाती है. और जीवन भी एक यात्रा है. पृथ्वी अपनी यात्रा कर रही है, ये पूरा कॉस्मस अपनी यात्रा कर रहा है. हम भी एक अपनी यात्रा के अंदर हैं. उस यात्रा की अनुभूति, उसको हम कैसे लेते हैं? तो अध्यात्म जो है ये अनुभूति है. कला जो है वो अनुभूति है. एस्थेटिक्स इज अनुभूति. यू नो, मेरे ताऊजी ने ही आस्क्ड मी कि तू कहीं पढ़ा है, क्या पढ़ता है? मैंने कहा जी वो मैं आई एम स्टडिंग आई एम परसुइंग माय मास्टर्स इन आर्ट एंड एस्थेटिक्स. और एस्थेटिक्स पढ़ा कहीं सांख्यिकी पढ़ता है क्या, एस्थेटिक्स? मैं कहा नहीं सर मैं तो एस्थेटिक्स पढ़ रहा हूँ। अरे भाया हिंदी में बता, टेल मी इन हिंदी। देन आई ट्रांसलेटेड कि सर आई एम परस्यूइंग माय मास्टर्स इन कला एवं सौंदर्य शास्त्र, ब्यूटी पार्लर का कोर्स करेंगे। तो ये ब्यूटी, अब उनका कहना ठीक था, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं एस्थेटिक्स अगर आप डेफिनेशन निकालेंगे, अल्टीमेटली आप एस्थेटिक्स को चर्न करें, हम अगर उसका चर्निंग ऑफ द ओशियन करें, आप सब देवता मैं दानव, है ना, चर्निंग ऑफ द ओशियन, तो उसमें से वो ब्यूटी के तत्व को ही हम कहीं ना कहीं ढूंढने की कोशिश करते हैं। वी आर ट्राइंग टू जस्ट ब्यूटी, सौंदर्य, अनुभूति। प्लेटो, एरिस्टोटल, लॉन्जाइनिस, होरस, इधर हमने कितने सारे नाम लेते, भट्ट लोलट, भट्ट नायक, श्री शंकुक, अभिनव गुप्त, यही खोज रहे। रस, सुबह इतना रस का बात हुआ, सारे रस 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 रस, रसो वयसः, शिव का एक नाम है रसेश्वर। रस, अब ये गन्ने का रस नहीं है, ऑरेंज जूस नहीं है, इट्स एक्सपीरियंस। तो ये एक एक्सपीरियंस कैसे हमें ट्रांसफॉर्म करता है, एक ट्रांस माइग्रेशन ऑफ दिस, आनंद देता है। कला नाम प्रबलम चित्रम धर्म कामार्थ मोक्षदम, धर्म अर्थ काम और मोक्ष को हमको मानना है। अब ये मोक्ष मरना नहीं है, मर जाएंगे जी मोक्ष, मरने की बात करते हैं हम तो लॉजिकल रेशनल हैं। अरे ये गोरखनाथ का मरना है, मरो रे जोगी मरो, मरो मरण है मीठा, ऐसी मरनी मरो जिस मरनी मरया गोरख डीठा। गोरखनाथ, अक्का महादेवी, लल्लेश्वरी, अलम प्रभु, चैतन्य महाप्रभु, बसवेश्वर, नामदेव, तुकाराम, नानक, सब उस मरने की बात कर रहे हैं, इटर्निटी की बात कर रहे हैं। तो ये दृग उस रमने की बात कर रहे हैं। तो दृग रमता है, रमता ही जाता है। सो दिस इज द रमता दृग, एक ऐसी आई जो रम रही है। विजुअल वहां नहीं बन रहा जी, इन बिटवीन सीयर एंड सीन। तो एक बुक है, देयर इज अ बुक, दृग दृश्य विवेक, 7th सेंचुरी का एक किताब है। तो उसको ट्रेन में एक बार हम पढ़ रहे थे, तब ये कविता है। और साथ में मेरे साथ में एक ऑस्ट्रेलियन आर्टिस्ट ट्रेवल कर रहे थे झारखंड में। नेक्स्ट सर, वी आर इंस्पायर्ड विद द स्वामी विवेकानंद, उनके थॉट प्रोसेस, रामकृष्ण के थॉट प्रोसेस से हमको प्रेरणा मिलती है। तो रमता दृग में हमने कुछ चीजें तय की कि जी हम एनजीओ नहीं बनाएंगे, पैसे नहीं इकट्ठा करेंगे, समाज करेगा, समाज से बात करेंगे। आप खाना खिला दो जी हमको, हम कुछ करते हैं, लेट्स सी। जहाँ पर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स हैं, हिंदू मुसलमान जहाँ पे लड़ रहे हैं, उन्होंने विवेकानंद को गले लगाया, क्योंकि वो एक कलेक्टिविटी की बात करते हैं। वो कलेक्टिविटी की, वो इसमें अभी मेरे को ध्यान में आया, वो कनेक्ट की बात करते हैं। 3 चीजें दुनिया में कनेक्ट करती है साहब, स्पोर्ट्स, लेकिन उसमें आप जीतना चाहते हैं, एक हारता है। दूसरा कनेक्ट करता है आपका बिजनेस, मुकेश अंबानी और कोई दूसरे हैं बिजनेस करने जाएंगे, लेकिन उसमें प्रॉफिट मेकिंग करना चाहते हैं। और तीसरा कनेक्ट करता है हमारा आर्ट। तो आर्ट में जीतना नहीं है, ये यहाँ पे तो विलीन होना है। तो ये विलीन होने का रास्ता है, निवृत्ति का रास्ता है। प्रवृत्ति तो सब सिखाएंगे, निवृत्ति हम कहाँ से पाएंगे? तो कलाएं हमें वैराग्य भी सिखाती है, कलाएं हमें वैरागी बनाती है। और वैराग्य से डरना नहीं, ये एक तत्व है लाइफ का। वैरागी रहेंगे तो सास भी कभी बहुत ही नहीं होगा। हमारे सबके घरों में, मेरी मदर भी, मेरी आज तो ऐसे आज वैसे, है ना। चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं। नेक्स्ट, ये कुछ इस तरह से प्रोग्राम हमने अभी कुछ शुरू किए थे उस समय पहले। नेक्स्ट, आगे बढ़ते हैं। नेक्स्ट, फीमेल्स, पीछे फीमेल्स को साथ में लेके हमने काम किया, जोधपुर में, बाड़मेर में, फलौदी में, बीकानेर के अंदर। माय मदर इज फ्रॉम बीकानेर। तो एक एक्सेस हमको, जहाँ पे इजी एक्सेस था वहाँ पे हमने काम किया, क्योंकि अभी प्रेजेंटेशन यही है, माय एक्सपीरियंस विद रमता दृग। ऑल्दो घर में ये डिनाई करते हैं, अरे अपनी बात मत कर, मैं तो बकरी करे भाई, तू क्यों मैं करे? जब मैं था तब हरी नहीं, अब हरी है मैं। नेक्स्ट प्लीज। तो यहाँ पे भी पीछे वाला, ये ग्रुप्स को हम इकट्ठा करते हैं, अर्बन स्पेसेस में हम काम करते हैं, रूरल स्पेसेस में जाके लोगों को इकट्ठा करके, बच्चों के साथ में, विमेंस के साथ में। नेक्स्ट, so Ramta Drig is a group of those people who are on their way of exploring and spreading creativity of any form, poetry, music, theatre, फिलोसॉफी, आप टेक्स्ट की बात करो, अभी कुछ दिन पहले संग्रामण सूत्रधार का एक जिक्र आया था, उसकी हमने बात की। संग्रामण सूत्रधार हमने उसमें कुछ और ऐड किए कि जी टेक्स्ट को ऐड करते हैं, मनसोल्लास, अपराजित प्रेच्छा, मयमत, विष्णु धर्मोत्तर पुराण, चित्रसूत्र, नृत्य शास्त्र। आइए जी कलेक्टिवली बात करते हैं, क्योंकि ये कलेक्टिव है। नेक्स्ट, ही इज डैनियल कॉनल, ही इज ऑस्ट्रेलियन आर्टिस्ट। तो ऐसे छोटे छोटे से स्पेसेस में नहरे बोलते हैं, कॉलेज मोहल्लों के बीच में नहरे होते हैं, वहाँ पे जा जाके हम लोग काम करते हैं। पैसे नहीं लेते जी किसी से, समाज में अपने आप सब अपनी तरफ से जो करेगा, क्योंकि कला का उद्देश्य देना है, देने वाले समाज का रिप्रेजेंट करता है कलाकार। इस भाव को लेके हम काम करते हैं। भाव इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। तो रस जो है वो भाव की एक निष्पत्ति करता है, रस से भाव आता है। रसा जो रस, नव रस हैं, श्रृंगार, हास्य, करुण, रौद्र, वीर, विभत्स, अद्भुत, शांत, है ना, हम बात कर रहे थे। तो रस से क्या होगा कि भाव का जनरेशन होगा। भाव, विभाव, अनुभव, संचारी, साधारणीकरण। तो अल्टीमेटली कला का उद्देश्य साधारणीकरण पर। सिंपल हो जाओ जी, गांठें तो लगी है, गांठों को खोल देते हैं। आनंदम ब्रह्मेति, उस आनंद की प्राप्ति, उस आनंद की तलाश। नेक्स्ट, हम लोगों को ऑस्ट्रेलिया बुलाया, फिर वहां पे चले गए। उन्होंने कहा कि ये आप कुछ करिए, और ऐसे ये जो ये बजाते हुए ये क्या है, ये ऐसे पुंगी लेके गए, वो सपेरे वाली, और ऑस्ट्रेलियंस नाच रहे हैं। आप देखो कमाल, म्यूजिक, नाद, अरे भीतर म्यूजिक है, उस म्यूजिक को एक्सप्रेस करना। और ये स्पिरिचुअलिटी वो चीज होती है जी, आपके पास अगर उसका थोड़ा तत्व आ गया तो जो सुख मैंने पाया वो दूसरा भी पाया। ये इसका अल्टीमेटली विपश्यना में क्या सिखाते हैं, बार बार गोयनका जी लास्ट में ये कहते हैं, जो सुख मुझे मिला ये दूसरे को भी मिल जाएगा। दैट इज स्पिरिचुअलिटी। नेक्स्ट सर, ये यूथ्स का हमारा टीम था। ये यूथ के साथ में कबीर यात्रा को हमने किया, वहां पे दंगे हो गए थे बीकानेर के पास में। तो गोपाल है मेरा दोस्त है, फिर उसमें वो भी कुछ और भी लोग थे, तो सब लोगों ने मिलके यात्राएं करी, गोरखनाथ के गीत गाए, जसनाथ जी की वाणियां गाई, सत्संग किए। तो कलेक्टिव हो गए लोग, और कोई लड़ने नहीं आया जी, प्यार करने आए। वो मैडम ने अभी कहा ना, केवल गाने से नहीं होगा, क्योंकि वो देखते हैं आप कैसे कर रहे हैं, पेंटिंग कर रहे हैं, अरे मेरे भी चित्र बना दो, अभी बनाते हैं सर। ये भाव इंपॉर्टेंट है, सबसे बड़ा भाव की प्रधानता है देश में, और अभी है हमारे यहाँ पे भाव जिंदा है। और आर्ट में क्या होता है कि एक स्कोप मिलता है आपको, खिलता है वो भाव। नेक्स्ट सर, यूथ्स के साथ में बस नेक्स्ट फटाफट हम देखते हैं। ये अमेरिका में रहते हैं बीच वाले अशोक जी, ये भी हमको मदद करते रहते हैं। कभी भी हमको कुछ जरूरत है, लोग मेरी तरफ से कुछ भी पैसे देने वालों को याद कर लिया जाए। नेक्स्ट, पोइट्री, स्पिरिचुअल पोइट्री, फिल्म्स, म्यूजिक, स्पिरिचुअल कविताएं। एक शहर में आप जाएंगे, कोई सर पोएट है क्या? मैं हूँ बेटा है, बाकी तो कोई नहीं है ना, ऐसे बोलेगा कोई बड़ा पोएट। हमने कई पोइट्स को, यंगस्टर्स को, चलिए जी पोइट्री करो, हिंदी में करो, उर्दू में करो, संस्कृत में करो, किसी में भी करो, कविता है, कविता में चेतना है। नेक्स्ट, ये यूथ्स के साथ में, बच्चों के साथ में। नेक्स्ट, अंतराल, एक अंतराल हमने किया, अभी वो नहीं रहे हमारे साथ में, एक हमारे मेंटोर थे, तो अंतराल एक बहुत सुंदर, नाना नानी न्यास और रमता दृग। नेक्स्ट, बच्चे नहा रहे हैं, इसमें भी अध्यात्म है। वो भी मुझे पूछा किसी ने कि कैसे हम बच्चों को आर्ट कैसे सीखें, स्विमिंग कराओ, रेत की तपिश को छुओ, पहाड़ को देखो, आर्ट हो जाएगा। नेक्स्ट, फटाफट देखिए। नेक्स्ट, आगे चलिए। और सब बिना पैसे, बिना सरकारी आयोजन, बस लोगों के साथ जुड़ के हो रहा है। ये हमारे जोधपुर के राजा जी हैं, गज सिंह जी, इन्होंने कहा जी मेरी तरफ से मैं अगर आना है साहब, अरे आऊँगा ना, क्यों नहीं आऊँगा, और बोले मुझे नहीं बुलाओगे, मैं कहा बुलाएंगे आपको, चलिए। ये जैसलमेर में हमने आई लव जैसलमेर का काम किया, वहाँ गार्बेज और ऐसे था, तो इसको पेंट करके बच्चों के साथ में। नेक्स्ट, बिल्कुल सुदूर राजस्थान का पीछे वाला जो फोटो, दिस इज शिव संवाद, शिव का कॉस्मोलॉजी वगैरह। चलिए सर बंद करते हैं, टाइम हो गया, डांटेंगे सर। थैंक यू।
बड़ा ही रोचक प्रेजेंटेशन था आपका, और कैसे म्यूजिक एक शेयर्ड स्पिरिचुअलिटी का रूप ले सकता है, उसको आपने बताने की कोशिश की। बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली स्पिरिचुअलिटी और कुछ है नहीं, इस इनसाइड वर्ल्ड, जैसे आप रिलेट करते हैं तो आउटसाइड वर्ल्ड। That is perhaps the biggest problem between science and spirituality.
This
Because-
painting is displayed downstairs.
Okay.
You are correlate that with that.
हाँ जी अभी टैक्स है आप पे नीचे जाके पेंटिंग जरूर देखिएगा
So very interesting. Now we have moved from theoretical perspective on conflict to the experience and practice. And now we are moving to slightly more abstract domain of this entire issue with Rakesh and Varsha making presentation on spirituality, consciousness and the social healing, particularly important. Okay, please go ahead.
थैंक यू सर। तो अमित सर अनुभूति की बात कर रहे थे और आध्यात्मिक आनंद की अनुभूति की बात कर रहे थे और उसके साथ साथ उन्होंने ये बताया कि कला में जो अनवरत होने की जो टेंडेंसी है, कंसिस्टेंसी एंड आर्ट हैविंग द फ्लो flair and the fragrance of life inscribed in it and entombed in it. So I would like to continue from where he left, or for that matter where he passed it on to me. So my topic is spirituality and consciousness in Baul's philosophy. And Baul's, as many of you might be aware of, are the music mystics and mystic minstrels of rural Bengal, Bangladesh and the adjoining regions. And they don't believe in the parochial perimeters of caste, class, creed, gender or race. And through love, through music, through singing, through dance, through wide singing, that's why they are known as madcaps as well, Bauls, they try to access the ontic layer and the multiple layers of divine reality that is present within the human existence itself. And those layers they conceptualize in terms of Kaya Tat, body, at the level of body, then Manas Tat, at the level of mind, then Gujru Tat, it is known as the mystic element, the esoteric element, then the Srishti Tat, existence, and then the Param Tat, the Almighty that they talk about. So they are basically in the search of the divine love and divine attainment, but through human love. So this search for inner man, what Tagore calls as Moner Manus, the inner soul and the essence of the man. So religion for Bauls is about the divinity of humans and humanity of divine. It is about invoking the immanent divinity that lies in the heart of a human, and at the same time not seeing God in some isolated and some kind of secluded cosmic abstraction, but in the sweetness and the spirit of human personality that Bauls are talking about. So they are seeing spirituality not in some kind, they are not seeing in some kind of renunciation or some kind of escape from worldly deeds and action, but in the very rhyme and the rhythm of life, in the very music and melody of the deeds, action and existence itself that lies here. So religion for Bauls is not any kind of organized or institutionalized religion or in any structured temple, mosques or churches, but religion for Bauls is the very defiance of the structure itself. And the nature becomes the playground, nature becomes the pilgrimage, and man or human is at the center of exploration, of discussion, of love and of attainment for Bauls. So religion for Bauls is not in some starry heavens or not having human and divine as two distinct orders, but it is in the very essence and it is in the very soul of a man, in the very soul of a human. In this way they are trying to see. And the different aspects of spirituality that Amit sir already mentioned, different kind of fluidity and flexibility Bauls give to the essence of divinity. They see that when the sweltering summer sun is beating at the back of the farmer who is trying to reap the harvest of his labor. So in the sweetness of that labor lies the essence of divinity for Bauls. In the freshness and the fragrance of the sweet jasmine flowers in the morning lies the essence of divinity for Bauls. And in the tiller who is tilling the plow and who is the path breaker who is breaking the stones. So defiance of their structure and in the playground of nature itself, how these things are conceptualized by Bauls. And one of the most famous Baul named Lalan Fakir, he is known as the most important mystic. he talks about the fact that in Viraha and Viyog, in the pangs of separation, when a lover faces, when he is not able to meet his sweetheart, so in the waiting of the lover lies the essence of divinity for Bauls. And he sings the song that you had whispered in my ear, that we are going to meet before the last light of twilight. Now the sun hath set on the shore. The wind is about to drift away the boat, but you have not arrived before the last glimmer of sunset. So that those pangs of separation, and now this desperation passes to the female lover, who talks about the fact that here, see how this kind of creative unity of human nature and God is intermingled. And the song of one of the women Baul singer goes that she is waiting for her lover now, and it is the frowning forest, and the clouds are pregnant with thunderbolts, and the ink black river is there, and she just wants to sing a song in the hall of his heart, and she just wants to take a corner seat in that. But now here, how they defy the ritualistic religion. She does not want her spirit to be tired or flagged for any poor preparation of worship of God in the night. But she just writes that the doors of my house and the doors of my heart are open, oh my eternal friend. Don't pass by like a dream. Just sneak in and accept the invitation of love. So this essence of this waiting and the pause that we take in the play of life, in the cosmic play of life, in that lies the spirit of spirituality for Bauls. So as Roy Varsha talks about differentiated structure, when he gives the concept of critical realism, that structures are not static, but they are relational and they are dynamic, and there is interaction between the structures that lead to the emergent properties. So from differentiated structure, Bauls, the philosophy of Bauls, I would like to theorize it in that sense. From differentiated structure, it goes towards the defiance of the structure itself. Now what happens with the structure of language? Because the canonized language, the sensitized language that we see in the religious text or in the Latin, in the Latin verses in different texts, do they agree with that language? As Lacan talks about, the famous psychoanalytical scholar after Freud, that language constructs human identity, and the unconscious is constructed like the language itself, and that remains in the symbolic domain. So Lacan talks about real, symbolic and imaginary. So that is the symbolic domain. But the real man, the real thing is unspeakable. It is unfathomable, beyond the purview of language. Here also Bauls defy the structure of language itself, and they say that no canonized language, but the language of love, and the language that has got no symmetry, but the language that embraces the mystery and the mystics and the different interplay of emotions. In that language they want to sing the song of love. Now finally, what about the structure of man? Because I started I basically inaugurated that it is the man or the human that lies as the center for exploration and attainment. Are they attached to the human body of a lover itself? There they introduces the concept that human body is just a flute to blow the divine symphony or the divine music of the cosmic attainment. And here the structure of the man or the structure of the human body is itself defined once again the defiance of the structure. And man becomes music here, through which flute the divine symphony is speaking and it is blowing up. So religion for Bauls, spirituality for Bauls, apart from the enhancement of consciousness from kaya tattva, from body to divine that I talked about, is about the divinity of humans and humanity of divine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rakesh.
Now for the conflict resolution part on Baul philosophy, I'd like to pass on to my colleague Varsha.
Thank you, Rakesh. I'll just make 2 quick points since Rakesh was dwelling upon the philosophy of Bauls. So I can, it's the philosophy of Bauls, if we place it in the historical context of Asian societies or societies of civilizations across the world, place we are. So, humility not just in terms of behavior, but in terms of mindset. And how do we bring it in the terms of mindset? So, humility allows individuals to approach conflicts with a sense of openness and a willingness to listen and understand the other person's perspective as well. Once we are really, into the humility value system, we really open up to others' perspectives as well. It creates an atmosphere of respect and understanding, which is crucial for resolving disputes and building meaningful relationships. In interpersonal conflicts, humility means recognizing that both parties are equally human, with their own flaws, desires, and fears. It allows one to let go of the need to win an argument or defeat an opponent. As Amitji was telling, that sports, it really joins people, but then you have that aspiration of winning, right? So, and defeat an opponent. And instead to work towards mutual understanding and reconciliation. By approaching conflict with humility, the individual allows space for the other person's point of view, reducing the emotional intensity of the dispute. It's always the emotions and passions that are turned to, raise the conflict in any group setting, right? So, at the heart of Baul philosophy is the transformative power of love now. Baus often speak of love as a divine force that connects all beings and leads the individuals towards spiritual fulfillment. In terms of conflict resolution, love is a powerful force for healing. This love is not just a passive feeling, but an active, transformative energy that can dissolve barriers and resolve disputes. It's much like Gandhi's Satyagraha. It's not a passive thing, right? So at last, I'll just want to point out some tools that Baus have been using, the active tools, and that is music and meditation. How music really helps, like Amitji said. We have that nad within us, and then we can reverberate with the society again, right? So in conflict resolution, the role of music can be seen as a tool for creating a shared emotional space. Music has the ability to transcend words and speak directly to the heart, often bypassing the defenses and egos that typically drive conflict. Singing together or listening to music that inspires feelings of unity and love can help individuals open up to each other and find resolution in ways that purely intellectual or argumentative approaches cannot, right? We can just imagine and do this thought experiment. Yes, I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes more. Okay, so having this music and art is really a social activity, and it really helps connect rather than having a very intellectual and argumentative thing. As ma'am pointed out, UN, all such conflict resolution mechanisms, they feel very mechanistic. Okay, last point about meditation. So meditation plays a crucial role in conflict resolution by quieting the mind and focusing inward. It helps individuals detach from the emotional turmoil of the conflict and approach situations with clarity and calmness. The Baus use meditation to cultivate an inner stillness that allows them to see beyond the surface of conflict and connect with a deeper truth. This clarity is invaluable when trying to navigate complex or difficult disputes, as it enables individuals to make decisions from a place of wisdom and compassion rather than from raging anger or fear or other passions. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. The chair has to do a very unpleasant job. So, thank you both Rakesh and Varsha for very interesting presentation. So really, we have traveled a long way, from theoretical to the practical to experiential and then moving to the abstract, particularly with reference to this Baul philosophy, consciousness. In fact, both of you have highlighted important aspect of this Baul's philosophy, particularly the way the spiritual truth, the quest for spiritual truth, as you were saying, how it can lead to reconciliation of societal conflict at the level of individual and at the level of the group. But whether that reconciliation ultimately leads to the transformation of a conflict or not, the issue which Varsha tried to highlight, and you mentioned Gandhi, I think that where he was coming to my mind when Rina was making presentation, because towards the end of his life, his entire experiment, particularly the Noah Khali and other places, was essentially meant in that direction, meant for that. But of course, that was, to what extent it was successful is itself a matter of debate. But anyway, very interesting paper. Now I open the discussion. I open all the papers for discussion, questions, but try to be brief and sharp. Yeah, please go ahead. Identify yourself.
Hello, I am Anshita Tripathi, MA first year CPS. My question is from Dr. Rina, and thank you, ma'am. The presentation was really amazing. It caught my attention that how can art serve as a tool for conflict transformation in societies such as that of Afghanistan, where such expressions are very restricted. There is a ban on expressions like art, and the world at large has hardly lamented this loss of art to the people of conflict-ridden societies like that in Afghanistan. So I seek your opinion on this.
Thank you. So I think what I was also underlining is that art by itself, number one, it does not it cannot lead to conflict resolution. Art by itself, it can't be that particular tool. And where art is really being used is in terms of what you're talking about is healing. So I spoke about how art is a critique, etc., etc. So here, when you're talking about healing, yes, you have at the individual level, you say, okay, you'll be painting, you'll be writing, you'll be dancing, as you know, Amit was telling us that. So that it can work, but the very fact that art has these subversive possibilities is the reason why it is banned. Is also the reason why art draws that censorship. So here the question, how can art be used when it's banned? How can it be used? So the question would be that once that context changes, what are they going to do? How can art now be a tool to now remember what happened with us? The Taliban came, the Americans came, and then the Americans exited. If art can lead to reflection in that society, whether through poetry or through drama or through dance or whatever other cultural forms, is to reflect on why is it that this happens to us? How do we get out of it? That would be the task of the artist. I mean, that would be.
Yes.
I'm Sanjana and I'm from CPS, JNU. My question was to both Rakesh and Varsha. Your paper, yes, was extremely interesting, but I'm also thinking of these words that you used, right? Some of the principles from Baul Philosophy of detachment, self-realization, humility, love, and meditation. I'll exclude love for a while, but humility, detachment, meditation, and self-realization. Now, if you think about the current times that we are living in, where certain people, political leaders, have also appropriated these very terms for their own political gains and have subverted the very potential possibilities of using these as a tool of resistance. Right? For instance, if we talk about meditation, that has a political currency in politics of India itself. Suddenly we see that before the elections there's a leader who's meditating, right? And then detachment has been used very in a very neoliberal time that we are living in. So how do you see these two as being connected?
Take more questions and then can correct questions and then.
Yeah, one more. Myself, Harshvardhan, and I have a question to Rakesh and Varsha. You were talking about the Baul philosophy, and if we are talking about the present time, we are living in a movement when there is a crisis of modernity. Modernity, when I am talking about modernity has always been associated with a binary thinking of it, like binary thinking between the tradition and being as a modern. Everyone want to be a modern. Being modern itself is something which is very westernized in the sense, and all the things like you are talking about art and particularly about the Baul philosophy. At this moment of crisis, these things always associate with the tradition, and everyone want to move from that tradition to modern and call themselves as a modern philosophy. So you talk about its benefit and how they can resolve conflicts. How would you save the art itself in this movement of crisis? Thank you.
Greetings everyone. This is Madhurya Chakravarti from CPS JNU, and my question would be to Dr. Rina Kashyap. So in reference to artist social criticism, also ma'am gave the examples of Imagine by John Lennon or Jine Na Se Hind Par Wo Kaha Hai from Pyasa. So there have been many such examples, like if you take the case of USA during the Vietnamese War, bands like Rolling Stones and Guns N' Roses have made a lot of songs on that. Or even to take the example of the Pyasa movie itself, Sahil Idhanvi through all its songs, Let It Be, Ye Dunya, Mit Jaye To Kya Hai, all the songs. And issues such kind of popular music or art form suffer is their commercialization and the relation to cinema. So in long term, people might forget that these tracks were written for a particular social phenomenon, war, and they get too much engrossed in their music. So which might defeat the entire purpose of that particular lyricist or singer. While instead that being a social commentary, it reduces to a simple commercial song. So how would that be navigated, or is there a solution to that transformation?
So,
करना चाहता हूँ इसको आपका ये I must narrate a little story. I visited Lawrence Mazar. वहाँ Lawrence Mazar में आर्टिस्ट बैठे हुए होते, तो उनसे मैंने गाना वाना सुनाया, उनसे पूछा भाई आप तो ये बाउल का नंबर बढ़ रहा है या कम हो रहा है? कह रहे बढ़ रहा है, और साधन बाउल वो कम हो रहा है, ये बात क्या है? इन्हें आजकल वो लालन साहब जो है वो अपना लुंगी छोड़कर पतलून में आ गए हैं. No, this is very critical. Now what I mean to say is that Lalan and all the Bauls have been critiquing also. To critique and salvation, इन दोनों को कैसे मिलाते हैं? ये एक सवाल है. And I was thinking about you कि आप जब समुदाय में जाकर काम करते हैं, वो किस तरह से आप बाहर की तरह से जाते हैं या अपने लोगों के अंदर, मतलब ये दोनों का रिलेशन कैसे बनता है? ये एक मतलब बच्चों के साथ काम करते हुए हमने देखा बहुत मुश्किल काम है, आसान नहीं है. मतलब फील्ड वर्क में जाकर हम समझते हैं कि क्या परेशानी होती है. तो हाउ डू रिजॉल्व दिस प्रॉब्लम?
मेरा नाम अंकित है, मैं CPS से हूँ और मेरा सवाल अमित सर से है. अमित सर की एक लाइन मुझे आकर्षित किया कि सर ने कहा कला वैराग्य सिखाती है, तो मैं चाहता हूँ कि आप इस पर थोड़ा प्रकाश डालें ताकि मैं समझ पाऊँ इसे. थैंक यू.
This is to Professor Kashyap, Rina Kashyap. I'm always confused whether making a museum of conflict or the history of conflict is good or bad. I mean, the Japanese example is very nice, which says that you should remember that in the context that there was a brutalization of us also. When I went to this Holocaust Museum in US, Washington, I had a feeling that the tone of the museum was to remind you of something, to provoke you to be alert about that always, not reconciliation. Or in the Amritsar temple, Golden Temple, when that particular portion was kept alive. So sometimes I feel it is for invoking that anger all the time, it should not die down. Sometimes I feel that remembering that you might create this kind of situation where there is no way out. So how do we see both the things in terms of conflict transformation? Is it good to forget history, as Gandhi says that happy is a nation which has no history, so that we don't have that conflict? That is one thing. Amit ji, I think that's very interesting way of conflict resolution, that you initiate a dialogue, and the dialogue should not be on the conflict itself, but transcending that to something else. Then maybe one gets back to it. Is that the method that you use to engage with people? And that actually gives you the space that Aziz is suggesting, right? And to Rakesh, I think this very significant point that Asita has raised, and most of such forms, somebody has worked on Qawwali at Nizamuddin, somebody has also worked on other Sufi science. That is there an impact of market on these traditions, and what is that impact that's creating a problem for them? Thank you.
Yes, anyone else?
So remember one more thing. I was reading a novel on Ukraine, the Museum of Abandoned Secrets. And that novel provoked this idea me to think whether the novel was written to remind Russian atrocities on Ukraine, or to tell them that you have to get rid of that.
So when Marinder sir was talking about the Amritsar Museum example as well, so I was just thinking if, ma'am, when you talk about conflict transformation, are you also looking at the politics of how there's also forgetfulness that's there, but also forgiveness that's there? So like if the dialectic of the two could be explained.
Okay, so to take these questions first together, since they are similar, I would, let's also just first remember that when I deliberately said that this particular discipline of conflict resolution has emerged in the post-Second World War in the US and in US universities, and so here the whole point now is how do you manage the conflict? That is, and this terminology of conflict transformation, I'm not questioning the intentions of people like John Paul Lederach, but essentially what they are saying is they are not looking at the macro conflicts. They talk about the micro. It is about you go and work in the villages, you tell them that, something similar to what your presentation was about, the Baul Philosophy. You look at the indigenous resources and say that we must live together, and that there is compatibility of our ideas, of our way of living. We've forgotten that. But if your problem is essentially coming from your current politics and economics and where you are today, then these just become means of co-option of dissent. That is one that would be my answer to your question also about what happens to Sahir's songs or Faiz's ghazals, what happens to them? Neither is Sahir nor a Faiz saying that I've written this and now the problem comes to an end. Ending the conflict is hard labor. It is, if Marx is writing poetry, which he does, he's also writing a Das Kapital, he's also talking to the German workers, he's also writing their manifestos, he's also a revolutionary. So there is a whole spectrum. So the task cannot just be that you have written something. Poetry on its own does not. So Bob Dylan could get the Nobel Prize for Peace, but these songs have not prevented the kind of atrocities we saw in Rwanda, what we are seeing in Ukraine, etc. So songs on their own, no. What I therefore did underline is the element of power, who's deciding what we are memorializing, how we are memorializing, what is it that we choose to remember. So Gandhi's point about let's not go there. If we choose to remember in terms of vengeance, revenge, it's how do you tell the story? Tagore talks about the fact that how the wandering mendicants in the village would be retelling the tale of Ramayana and Mahabharata, and in the process what you're doing is you are revisiting the conflicts, and each society is coming up with its own answers. So the work, what exactly is the purpose with which that museum, who's making that museum? So all our talk about art and spirituality, etc., may come to a naught if we do not take into account the element of power. But then we do what we best can, like we make that particular effort, and I think, yeah, that's what I would say, is that we keep doing the work we are doing, we try to make a difference to whoever one person we can. But otherwise, I mean, I think about the University of Delhi as a system. What we are going through now, new education policy, 3 lectures, the course being reduced, and the course being the same, we have 3 lectures, so what do we do? So you just try to have your own agency wherever you can. But we can't forget the structures, and I think therefore marks also will become important, constantly reminding us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so my response to her should be, when we are talking about crisis of modernity and the dualism and binary aspect that comes with it, Baul's philosophy and the philosophy that is in question, it is in discussion right now, is against binary and dualism, that the different aspects would have spoken up to you. And even in the field of religion, where the sense sexuality and spirituality are seen as 2 distinct layers which are not generally taught, and the persons are professing, that also is the defiance there, and there is an intermixing of the 2. So Baul's work on the body fluids and what it emerges. So modernity is about becoming, and this is about being. Modernity is about construction, this is about creation. Modernity is about the artificial and dichotomous binaries. This is about the natural flow and flare of life. So in that sense, we can conceptualize that. About what Ashish sir was asking about, what you saw in Lalama's, his Mazar, very interesting, sir. And that is also somewhat related to the point of co-option that ma'am was talking about. But so the first part, when you ask how critique and salvation are related to each other, so in the spiritual philosophy, in many schools, not too much in bhakti yoga, but gyan marg that is there, the path of knowledge that is used to attain the final self-realization and all. So vade jayate tattva is the one thing that you debate, discussion, and go to there. And since you don't believe in anything in the path of knowledge itself, apart from the hypothesis, the general hypothesis that you take, so critique is the very motor engine that Rina ma'am was talking about Hegel and Marx. They talk about how critique becomes important. Critique is the very motor engine of the creation and production of new knowledge. And that is finally leads to a point where all the dust and the dormancy is removed and whatever is there is found, in that sense. One little what you asked about market, what Thakur sir was also talking about. So ma'am, about co-option of dissent that you're talking about, I guess that business and politics, market and politics. So market has the tendency for capitalization and politics has the tendency for co-option, because this is the way both go forward. So in terms of, once again, Indian knowledge tradition, I used to take one term to describe this, but sir was also asking, anything that is of sattvic pravritti, of very high standard, high quality. So a conflict between 3 gunas, and the conflict between what we call Trigunatmak Prakriti, Sat, Raj and Tam. So anything that is sattvic, the Rajasic will always try to co-opt it. It will always try to capitalize upon it because it has to make business and profit out of that. So through the interplay, what Bhagavad Gita talks about, through the constant tension between these 3 gunas, we reach to the level of gunatit, that is the point we realized that. So I think it is a natural tendency of capitalization and co-option in market and politics. This would be my kind of submission. For Sanjana's part, Varsha, you can answer. Thank you.
Sanjana's question was in part answered by Dr. Rina's ma'am's position as well. But I like to just differentiate when you say that they are using detachment, self-realization. So there is a difference. They are using it just for politics purposes, terminology. They are using it just as a symbolic thing, right? So there is a difference between when you adopt it in action. So therein lies the difference, and that is true that they will co-opt it, the structures will co-opt it, right? So we have to be really, be careful, and that therein lies my small stance on Ashish sir's question, how to reconcile this, critique and salvation. I've read your article, sir, on Baul's. I know it's the position there as well. So Dr. Thakur has been teaching us to, re-question things, keep re-questioning your position. So as the Baul's philosophy also tells, we need not idealize their corpus as well. We need to question them also, we need to keep questioning them also, and just take what is really useful for our conflict resolution purpose. Yeah, I'll just end with this. Thank you.
There was a question that कि कैसे कला वैराग्य को सिखाती है, तो भर्तरी याद आए मुझे। भर्तरी, त्रिकांडी भर्तरी भी कई किस्म के हैं। ये एक भर्तरी नहीं थे, ग्रामेरियन भी थे भर्तरी, लेकिन ये भर्तरी जो थे, इन्होंने श्रृंगार नीति, है ना, श्रृंगार और फिर नीति, और तीसरा क्या लिखा है, वैराग्य शब्द का। तो वैराग्य एक इंटीग्रल पार्ट रहा है, और आर्ट में, विजुअल आर्ट्स में डिजाइन भी एक वैराग्य को सिखाती है। अभी क्या हुआ, एक दिन मैं कहीं ट्रेवल कर रहा था, बचपन से सुनते हैं, हिंदू परिवार में जन्म लेते हैं, अज्ञानम तिमिरांधस्य ज्ञानांजन शलाकया चक्षुरुर्मीलितम उन्मीलितम येन तस्मै श्री गुरुवे नमः अखंडम मंडलाकारम। अखंडम मंडलाकारम, उस पे क्वांटम मंडल मीन्स द सर्किल, और सर्किल कैसा अखंड है, तो मेरा गुरु कैसा है जी, कि जो अखंडित है, जो खंडित नहीं है। सर्किल, नो बिगिनिंग नो एंड, कॉस्मस। तो आपका एक कॉस्मिक रिलेटिविटी कहीं ना कहीं जुड़ती है, एक बूंद बूंद बिंदु बनती रेखा देती दस्तक, मन की सतहों पर फलक उतर आड़ी तिरछी बंद बिखर घूम घूम आकृतियां है रचती। आकृतियों में एक वैराग्य है, डिजाइन में एक वैराग्य है। ये अब नया डिजाइन नहीं, लेकिन फिर से लोग बागा फिर से नए तरीके से स्टूडेंट्स उसको ढूंढ रहे हैं। तो हमारे जो पुराने घर होते थे, पुराने डिजाइन में है, उसमें कहीं ना कहीं वैराग्य की उपस्थिति होती थी। माय दादी वॉज योगिनी, वो एक योगिनी थी इस लाइफ के अंदर। 80s में वो गुजर गई, मैं उसके साथ में रहा। खुशबू है मेरे को उसका अभी तक, उसके पल्लू से चिपकता था, उसका खुशबू आता शरीर का। वो रात को वैराग्य के गीत गाती थी एवरीडे, 365 दिन रात को हरजस करती थी। हर जस हरि का जस, मैं तो हरीरा जस गाऊंगा जी। तो रात को जो गीत गाएगी वो वैराग्य के गीत हो गए, और एक छोटे से बच्चे को वो वैराग्य के गीत दे रही है कि भाई इन दुनिया से कहीं लेना देना को नहीं, थाने कठे और जाना है, तू कहीं और जाएगा, लेकिन यहीं रहेगा। लेकिन सुबह वो फिर से, जब सुबह के उसके गीत होते थे तो वो वैराग्य के नहीं होते थे, सुबह वो अटैचमेंट के गीत होती थी, दुनियादारी सिखाती थी, नीति सिखाती थी, भगवत गीता सिखाती थी, अटैकिंग फोर्स, काम करो, ये करो, वो करो। लेकिन रात को एक छोटा सा वैराग्य का, तो कलाओं में ये होता है। तो हमारे भी जैसे मान लीजिए पेंटर्स होते हैं, वैराग्य को सिखाते हैं, सृजन और विसर्जन। कहते हैं डोंट लव योर आर्ट, वो जाएगा तो वो तुम रहोगे, तुम्हारा एग्जिस्टेंस उसके जाने में है। तो ये बड़ा फिलोसफी, वो जो गोरख की अपन बात कर रहे थे, वो फिजिकल डेथ की बात नहीं कर रहा, वो इटर्नल होने की बात कर रहा है। हम न मरही मरही संसारा, हमको मिला जिलावन हारा। मेरे रंग, मेरी रेखाएं, मेरे बिंब, मेरे प्रतिबिंब, मेरे रूप, मेरे अरूप, फॉर्म, लाइन, टेक्सचर्स, एलिमेंट्स, ये हमारे लिए वो जिलावन हारा है जो हमको जिंदा रखे।
Thank you. This we come to the end of the session. Very interesting questions and issues were raised, and all three presentations, first-rate presentations, they took this entire discourse to a very high plane of abstraction and discussion. One thing is very clear, that art as a tool of defiance and rebellion has always been there. But does it lead to the transformation of destructive energy into the constructive one, the creative one? That is perhaps the main issue today. And I mean, someone was raising this issue that how far the traditional resources, particularly getting expressed through art, can succeed in today's context, when the challenges are totally different, particularly the modern institutions, the modern values, and many other things. And here there comes this question of keeping the memory through archives, through history, through various modes, how far that is going to help people remembering their the past and the brutalized past and to overcome it. That is perhaps one thing, because as we know today, world over, this memory is at times is kept and is ignited, reignited again and again, because that is perhaps the main source of, that is perhaps main political fodder in terms of the larger discourse which is with us today in this name of neoliberalism and other things. So these are the challenges, but nonetheless art still can play a very important role within the given constraints. So with these words I stop here, and thanks again to the organizers.